I knew something was off the moment I stepped into the house that day. It wasn't the kind of feeling you could shake off, more like the heavy weight of a storm cloud hovering overhead. The scent of someone else's cologne lingered faintly in the air, blending awkwardly with the cinnamon candle Amy always lit in the evenings. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but enough to make me stop in my tracks. My name's Patrick, and at 35, I thought I had life pretty much figured out. I managed a tech consultancy in a bustling mid-sized city. A job that kept me on my toes but paid well enough for Amy and me to live comfortably. Amy was 33 and ran a small home staging business. She had an eye for design that could turn any drab space into a place straight out of a catalog. Together, we were the couple everyone envied, or so I thought. It was our 7th anniversary that day. I'd left work early, carrying a box with Amy's favorite chocolate truffles and a small diamond bracelet I'd been saving for months to buy. We'd been through some rough patches, especially over the past year, but I wanted to show her we could still be that couple we used to be. As I pushed the door open, the silence in the house felt unnatural. Usually, Amy had music playing or the TV droned in the background. Instead, there was just stillness. The living room looked untouched, too perfect like it had been staged for a photo shoot. That wasn't unusual for Amy, but it added to the eerie sense that something wasn't right. As I walked further into the house, I noticed her phone lying on the kitchen counter, screen glowing faintly with a notification. Amy never left her phone unattended. She once joked that she'd sooner lose her wallet than her phone. I debated whether to look, feeling a pang of guilt at the thought of invading her privacy. But the oddities of the day nagged at me. The screen showed a preview of a text. "When's he leaving? Can't wait to see you again, babe." A cold rush swept over me. My hand trembled as I unlocked the phone with the code I'd memorized over years of shared Netflix accounts and travel itineraries. There it was. A string of messages between Amy and someone named Ethan. Flirty, intimate, and filled with details I'd rather not have read. Ethan was apparently on his way to our house. My house. The next few minutes passed in a haze. I felt like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Not mine. I wanted to scream, to smash the phone, to confront Amy right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table gripping the edge so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't want a confrontation fueled by raw emotion. I wanted control, clarity, and most importantly, a plan. Amy and I had no children, which in hindsight felt like a blessing at that moment. It gave me room to act without worrying about innocent casualties in the mess she created. I scrolled further through the messages, piecing together a timeline. They'd been seeing each other for months. Ethan worked at a gym across town, and Amy's late client meetings were often excuses to meet him. The betrayal cut deep, but my mind was already racing ahead. I'd spent my career solving complex problems for clients. Now I had to solve this my way. I didn't have long before Ethan arrived. Amy was upstairs. I could hear the faint sound of water running in the shower. For a fleeting moment, I considered marching up there and confronting her immediately, but something held me back. Anger without a plan felt wasteful. I couldn't let this spiral into a shouting match that would give her the upper hand. No, I needed her to feel the full weight of what she'd done. Not just now, but for a long, long time. I pocketed her phone and slipped out the back door into the yard. My chest tightened as I ducked behind the garden shed. From here, I had a clear view of the driveway where my car was parked and the front walkway leading to the house. I felt like a stranger in my own life, an observer of a scene I never imagined would involve me. 15 minutes passed before a sleek black sedan pulled up. Ethan stepped out. His broad shoulders and casual athletic were giving away the fact that he wasn't just some desk jockey. He sauntered up to the door with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the place. My stomach churned as I watched him knock twice before letting himself in. The door clicked shut behind him. The audacity. I moved quickly, circling back to the front yard and slipping inside through the garage door. My heart pounded as I crept toward the living room. Ethan's voice drifted in from the kitchen, deep and casual, like he'd done this 100 times before. Amy's laugh followed, light and carefree. It was a laugh I hadn't heard in months. "Wine's in the fridge," she said. "Grab a glass for me, too?" I had to steady myself against the wall. They were so comfortable, so shameless. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to stay quiet. This wasn't the time to explode. Not yet. I retreated to the office down the hall and shut the door softly behind me. From here, I could barely hear them, but I didn't need to. My goal now was to secure evidence. I fired up my desktop and logged into the shared cloud account where Amy and I backed up our devices. Sure enough, her phone had been syncing automatically. Texts, photos, even a few suggestive videos exchanged between her and Ethan. It was all there. My hands shook as I saved everything to an encrypted folder on a USB drive. I wasn't going to rely on a messy, he said, she said situation. I needed hard proof. Not just for my peace of mind, but for the divorce attorney I was already planning to call. Amy had no idea I'd been quietly putting money aside for years in case of an emergency. This wasn't the emergency I had envisioned, but I wasn't about to let her blindside me. Once I had everything I needed, I returned to the living room. Ethan and Amy were seated on the couch, glasses of wine in hand. For a moment, neither of them noticed me standing there. It was Ethan who spotted me first, his face draining of color as he realized who I was. Patrick. Amy stammered, nearly spilling her wine. You're home early. Clearly, I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. I looked at Ethan, and you must be Ethan. Nice to finally meet you. He stood up, but I didn't give him the chance to speak. Sit down, I said sharply. To my surprise, he did. Maybe it was the look in my eyes, or maybe he wasn't as confident as he seemed. Amy, meanwhile, looked like a deer caught in headlights. Patrick, I can explain, she began, but I held up a hand. Save it. I'm not interested in whatever excuse you've rehearsed for this moment. Her mouth snapped shut, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Good. She needed to feel that. You've made some choices, Amy. I continued, pacing slowly. And those choices have consequences, but don't worry. I'm not going to lose my temper. I've already got everything I need to ensure this ends the way it should. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. I turned to Ethan. You might want to leave now. This doesn't concern you anymore. He hesitated, glancing at Amy for guidance, but she said nothing. With a mumbled excuse, he bolted for the door, leaving his half-empty wine glass behind. Coward. Once he was gone, I sat down across from Amy and pulled out her phone. I placed it on the table between us, the screen still glowing with the incriminating messages. She didn't need to look to know what was on it. I loved you, I said quietly. The weight of those words heavier than I'd expected, but I won't be made a fool of. Patrick, please, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. We can fix this. I shook my head. No, Amy. You broke this, and now I'm going to make sure you feel exactly what you've put me through. Her tears turned to sobs as I got up and left the room. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't need to. She had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours meticulously putting the final pieces of my plan together. Amy might have blindsided me with her betrayal, but I was determined to ensure the fallout was hers to carry. By morning, I had everything I needed. Evidence, a strategy, and a clear sense of what had to happen. First, I contacted my lawyer. Sheila wasn't just any attorney. She was a sharp, no-nonsense professional who specialized in high-conflict divorces. I had worked with her before, years ago, during a messy business dispute, and I knew she was exactly the person I needed on my side. By the time Amy stumbled into the kitchen, looking bleary-eyed and remorseful, I had already forwarded everything Sheila needed to begin the process. Amy sat down at the table, clutching her coffee mug like it was a lifeline. Patrick, I know I hurt you. I don't even know how to start making this right, but I'm begging you to give me a chance. I stared at her, the woman I had once considered my partner in life. The sincerity in her voice might have swayed me years ago, but now it felt hollow like an actor fumbling through an audition. I don't think you understand, Amy. We're done. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and you'll be hearing from her soon. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the months of deception, the messages, the laughter she shared with Ethan while I was breaking my back to build a future for us. That pity evaporated like smoke. I'll give you until the end of the month to move out. I continued, my tone even. In the meantime, I'd suggest you start looking for a place to stay. And if you think you're getting a penny more than what's legally yours, you're mistaken. She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she simply nodded. Maybe she thought she could still salvage something in the coming weeks. I had no intention of letting that happen. The next step was Ethan. It wasn't enough for him to simply walk away unscathed. He'd knowingly involved himself with a married woman, flaunting their relationship in my own home. That level of arrogance demanded a response. A few quick online searches gave me all the information I needed. Ethan's gym was a boutique operation catering to wealthy clients. The kind of place that relied heavily on reputation and word of mouth. Conveniently, he was also quite active on social media, where he frequently posted shirtless selfies and motivational platitudes. His online persona screamed alpha male, but his posts also revealed a surprising amount of personal information. Names of clients, photos of his car, even the address of his gym. Armed with this knowledge, I crafted an anonymous email detailing his affair with a married woman, complete with screenshots of the texts and photos. I sent it to the gym's owner, a no-nonsense woman named Karen who was tagged in several of Ethan's posts. From what I could gather, Karen didn't tolerate unprofessional behavior, and I had no doubt she'd take swift action once she saw the evidence. To ensure the message wouldn't be ignored, I also forwarded it to several of the gym's high-profile clients, all of whom were prominently featured in Ethan's social media posts. Within hours, the fallout began. By the next day, Ethan's Instagram was flooded with angry comments, and a quick check of the gym's website revealed that his profile had been removed. One small victory, but that was just the beginning. Public humiliation wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions financially as well. Using some of the information I'd gleaned from his posts, I hired a private investigator to look into his background. What they found was almost too good to be true. Ethan had a history of questionable dealings, including several unpaid debts and a pending lawsuit over a botched personal training contract. Armed with this information, I anonymously tipped off his creditors, ensuring they knew exactly where to find him. Meanwhile, I set my sights on Amy. She had no idea what I was orchestrating behind the scenes. While she spent her days alternating between tearful apologies and sullen silence, I quietly began unraveling the financial web of our marriage. We kept most of our finances separate, but there were a few joint accounts and investments that needed to be divided. I ensured that every transaction was accounted for, documenting anything that could be used to dispute her claims in court. I also took steps to protect my professional reputation. Amy and I had attended numerous social events together over the years, and I knew she would try to paint herself as the victim to mutual friends and acquaintances. To preempt this, I made a series of discreet calls to key people in our social circle, sharing a carefully crafted version of events. I avoided overtly bashing Amy, instead framing the situation as a painful but necessary step to move forward. The weeks leading up to the divorce proceedings were tense, but oddly satisfying. Amy tried repeatedly to reach out, leaving long, rambling voicemails and sending texts filled with promises to change. I ignored them all. She even showed up at my office once, but my assistant, who was well aware of the situation, turned her away without hesitation. When the court date finally arrived, Amy looked defeated. Her lawyer, a middle-aged man who seemed more interested in his phone than in her case, barely put up a fight. Thanks to Sheila's meticulous preparation, the division of assets went exactly as planned. Amy walked away with far less than she'd hoped, while I retained ownership of the house and the majority of our savings. As we left the courtroom, she caught up to me in the hallway. "Patrick, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I made a mistake, but can't we at least try to fix this? I still love you." I looked at her, feeling nothing but exhaustion. "You loved me when it was convenient, Amy. Now you can love the life you chose instead." I walked away without looking back. Life didn't just return to normal after the divorce. It started fresh. The house, once filled with memories of shared moments and laughter, felt like a clean slate. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and threw out anything that reminded me of Amy. Every stroke of the paintbrush, every trip to the dump felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she'd taken. But one thing still lingered, the final chapter of my plan. Amy had suffered the legal and financial consequences of her actions, but she had yet to face the social fallout. That was about to change. Amy's business relied on a pristine reputation. Her home staging company was successful because people trusted her taste and professionalism. She'd cultivated an image of class and sophistication, one that would crumble under the weight of the truth. I didn't want to lie or fabricate anything. What she'd done was damning enough on its own. Using the contacts I'd built over the years, I arranged for her betrayal to come to light in the most public way possible. I anonymously shared the evidence of her affair with a handful of local realtors who worked closely with her. They were polite but ruthless professionals. And in their world, reputation was everything. An email with screenshots of texts and photos framed as a warning about Amy's questionable ethics spread like wildfire. I also reached out to a few of her past clients, dropping anonymous tips that implied her personal life might spill into her work. I didn't have to embellish. People love a scandal, and the story practically wrote itself. Within weeks, her business began to suffer. Realtors stopped referring her, citing concerns about professionalism, and clients canceled contracts. Social media posts from her business page were flooded with passive-aggressive comments questioning her integrity. It was clear her empire was crumbling, brick by carefully staged brick. Meanwhile, Ethan wasn't faring much better. The fallout from the gym debacle had been swift, but the financial repercussions were still unfolding. One of the creditors I'd tipped off had frozen his accounts, forcing him to sell his car and move out of his apartment. The lawsuit over his botched contract escalated, and with no steady income to fall back on, he was scrambling to keep up. From what I could tell, Amy wasn't rushing to his rescue. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their relationship had ended shortly after the divorce was finalized. Apparently, Ethan had tried to guilt Amy into helping him pay off his debts, but she'd refused. "I didn't sign up for this," she allegedly told him. Poetic justice, really. Despite everything, Amy still tried to reach out to me. Her emails ranged from furious rants to tearful pleas, each one more desperate than the last. I never responded, but I did keep them just in case. I wasn't interested in dragging things out further, but I also wasn't naive enough to think she wouldn't try to turn the narrative in her favor if given the chance. One email in particular stood out. It was short, just 3 sentences. "Why are you doing this to me? I made a mistake, but you're ruining my life. Haven't you done enough?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting the message. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was about making sure she understood the consequences of her choices. She had dismantled our life together for a fleeting affair, and now she was reaping the rewards of her betrayal. As the months passed, the dust began to settle. Amy's business eventually folded, and she moved out of state to start over. Ethan disappeared from the social scene entirely, likely drowning in debt and regret. I didn't care enough to follow up. For me, life got better. Without the weight of a toxic relationship dragging me down, I found new energy for my work and hobbies. I reconnected with old friends, traveled, and even started dating again. But this time, I was more cautious, more deliberate. Trust had to be earned, not given blindly. One evening, while sitting on my newly redecorated couch, I reflected on everything that had happened. There was no satisfaction in what I'd done, just a sense of closure. I hadn't sought revenge to feel better. I'd done it to move forward, to rebuild my life on a foundation of honesty and respect, and I had succeeded. Thank you, friends.